Hi there, Chris from Stone Age Gamer here, and welcome back to the gratuitous Rainbow Spectrum, where it is once again time for a 16-bit Brawl. This is a series where we take two games, one for Super Nintendo, one for Sega Genesis, and pit them against each other to see which one is best. With us being mere days away from the season finale of the honestly spectacular XMen 97, I thought it would be a great time to compare this game, XMen for Sega Genesis, with this game, XMen Mutant Apocalypse for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Which mutant madness works better? Which one's the better game? We're about to find out.
X-Men in video games go back a long way, and a lot of their earlier adventures weren't exactly good, but that all changed when Konami's X-Men hit arcades. It was all part of a golden era of popularity for Marvel's mutants, and with the toys, trading cards, and TV show all performing incredibly well, not to mention the actual comics, video game fans were itching to get their claws on a proper home conversion of the arcade beat-em-up. Unfortunately, that never happened. What did happen, though, was a number of unique X-Men-themed games from various places, including one developed by Western Digital for the Sega Genesis, and one from Capcom for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Let's take a closer look at the contenders. First up, we have X-Men for Sega Genesis. Now, there were actually two X-Men games on the Sega Genesis, unless you count stuff like Spider-Man and X-Men, which we do not, and only one on the Super NES, and the Super Nintendo one landed smack dab in the middle of the two Genesis releases, so we're going to go with the first one because, one, it's far more iconic, and two, because it's the game I know better. I never spent much time with X-Men 2 Clone Wars, so I'm not really in a position to compare that one to anything. I did, however, play the heck out of X-Men as a kid, and wow, what a game this is. I have to acknowledge right off the bat how incredibly flawed X-Men is, but it's so darn cool it's hard to complain too much. This came at a time when everyone wanted a home console port of that X-Men arcade game, and Konami absolutely refused to answer the call, so any game that wasn't an LJN mediocrity fest was a welcome addition to anyone's game library. This is a side-scrolling action game where you find the X-Men stuck in an out-of-control danger room. You'll face off against the likes of Juggernaut, Magneto, and, Ahab? Yeah, there was a little barrel scraping going on here in terms of villains, but the playable heroes made up for it. You can choose to play as Gambit, Nightcrawler, Cyclops, and of course, Wolverine. It's a very Sega Genesis game, if that makes any sense, but anything it lacks in technical prowess, it made up for in sheer coolness. Over on the Super NES, we have X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. This one's also a side-scrolling action game, but much like the Aladdin situation, this was handled by Capcom, and boy does it show! Not only does it feature killer graphics and music that use the same instrument set as the Mega Man X titles, but your character's special moves are performed the same way as the ones in Street Fighter. The Super Nintendo game doesn't have Nightcrawler, but in his place are Beast and Psylocke, in addition to Gambit, Cyclops, and of course, Wolverine. Together they'll face off against the likes of Juggernaut, Magneto, and, Tusk. They sure did love throwing D-tier villains into these games, didn't they? Now that we've taken a closer look at the combatants, let's see how they fare. This is not even close. Even if Mutant Apocalypse wasn't a gorgeous game in its own right, X-Men for Sega Genesis is not a good-looking game. Sure, the art direction is okay, but nothing animates well, everything moves clunky and choppy, and even a lot of the still shots just look janky as heck. Mutant Apocalypse, though, is Capcom working their magic. Special moves animate brilliantly, the characters are enormous and detailed, bosses look great, like the huge Sentinel battle. It's all wonderful. It's weird to even have to point this out, but it's also quite stable. This, in comparison to the Genesis game that sometimes feels like it's going to fall apart at any moment, is a huge plus. Mutant Apocalypse mops the floor with the Genesis game in this category. Once again, this is an easy win for the Super NES game, but that's not to say there isn't anything good going on in the Genesis. When you think of the stereotypical Genesis fart noise, this is the example. The Genesis was capable of some truly incredible sound, but when used poorly, well, you wound up with this symphony of flatulence. The compositions themselves are pretty good. They aren't amazing or anything, but I can still hum them at that title screen music. It's catchy stuff. And then there's the sound effects, none of which are effective, and also sound like they were ripped straight out of someone's butt. The sound in this game is flat out bad. Mutant Apocalypse, though, is very good. The sound effects are mostly awesome, and the music sounds solid. In terms of compositions, I might actually give the edge to the Genesis game, as I honestly can't remember how a single tune in this game goes, but forgettable yet cool music is a pretty big step up from downright bad. Another easy win for the Super NES. Looks like this one's gonna be a bit of a shutout. Look, the Genesis game is very cool, and even has that fantastic reset button moment towards the end. Seriously, if you don't know, look it up. But this game is so out of control clunky to play, it's almost unbelievable. Nothing in X-Men actually feels good to do. Even summoning your fellow X-Men to help out doesn't take the sting out of things. Wolverine has a mutant power meter that drains whenever he has his claws out. I'm sorry, but there should never be a penalty for Wolverine just having his claws out in an X-Men game. Mutant Apocalypse isn't perfect either, but it's a heck of a lot more polished than this fart fest. The character movement can be a bit stiff, but the feedback loop from clearing a group of enemies with Cyclops' optic blasts or pouncing on enemies as Beast is fantastic. The Super NES game is simply more fun to play, in my opinion.
And there you have it. We compared them, we contrasted them, and the winner is X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. Really, as great as X-Men is for Genesis, and don't get me wrong, I love this game, but it has got some pretty deep flaws, and this is Capcom doing Capcom. This game rules. So what did you think? Did you like what you saw here today? If you did, please follow, comment, like, subscribe, and share, and let us know down in the comments. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think this is the better game than this game? Do you think I should have compared Mutant Apocalypse to Clone Wars? Was that a more fair comparison? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I love hearing from everybody. Thank you again for watching. On behalf of all of us here at Stone Age Gamer, keep playing games.